Hey everyone, and welcome to Cybersecurity Compliance, meeting updated TSA guidelines for oil and gas pipelines. Today's webinar is sponsored by Xage Security and produced by ActualTech Media. I'm Keith Ward with ActualTech Media, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this important presentation today. First, though, I've got to cover some housekeeping stuff. First off, we want your questions for our Xage Security expert. Just put them in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Our expert today will be answering questions during the presentation, so keep them coming. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is the first thing you want to do if you can't hear or see something, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we will provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of that webinar control panel, just to the left of the questions tab, has loads of great resources. Those include 2 free PDFs from Xage, a top 10 checklist on pipeline compliance, and one on pipeline cybersecurity directives. I strongly encourage you to download those free resources now and check them out. Lots of great stuff in there. Other stuff to find in the handout section are links to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to ActualTech Media's vast catalog of books on technology topics. You'll also see a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. We've got some for 2024 right now that you can sign up for, so check those out, and we will see you on some of those next year. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize for any of our events. If you want to read the official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing, they can be found in the handout section. Those are good to look at night if you're having trouble sleeping, as a matter of fact. And with that, let's get the ball rolling to the main attraction. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. He is Michael Leonard, Senior OT System Engineer for Xage, and Michael is ready to go, so I am going to turn this over to him. Michael, take it away.
Yeah, Keith, thank you very much. I'm super happy to be here and excited to talk about these latest updates from the TSA. I'll get right into it. First of all, my name is Michael Leonard. I'm a senior OT security engineer with Xage. I have about 20 years experience, probably more than that now, in different facets of either networking, network security, or OT operations and cybersecurity. Some with large chemical manufacturers and folks who produce things like oil and fertilizer and such. What we want to talk about is these unique risks and challenges in the midstream operations, and they're not always different than other critical infrastructure. A lot of them do align and they're the same, but what we see is things like safety and downtime being extreme in these cases versus more of an OT type of operation. So you think about a pipeline going down or something that's processing it. A lot of times we call it the money printer. So they also have legacy equipment sitting in their environment. Again, big difference from IT in the fact that depending on what you're manufacturing and what you're making, you may put a tool in that runs on a software that was not designed to go the same amount of time as that piece of hardware or the tool itself. So think about things like Windows XP and Windows 7 still sitting in these OT environments, even though they are completely done as far as there's no more patching, there's no more access to the types of security features of modern OSs. But at the same time, we have to weigh that with the needs of the business. And that means that, if we think about oil and you take those operations offline, there's a significant amount of money that is being lost just to implement this type of security feature, replace the OS. In some cases, it's not even possible. You can't turn down, like, for example, a glass furnace for many years without that glass solidifying. So you have to plan and really think about the way that you secure these networks and what happens if there are changes. So, the attack vectors may not be the same. New viruses come out, new malware come out, and you have to be able to shift and think about how you can apply those mitigating controls and compensating controls, as well as take away the attack vector. Regulation is increasing because of not only recent events, but past events. As early as the 2016s, 2017s. I won't name names, but lots of large oil manufacturers did either get malware in their business that caused them to shut down operations, or they couldn't understand what was in their network and they had to pause operations. The evolving TSA Security Directive. So basically what we're saying is that over time, we're seeing this mature. In 2021, we have the Colonial Pipeline attack. We have all of these other things that are leading up to the TSA directive. So what they're saying here is we're trying to figure out what's going on. We need an action plan, and you need to have us approve it. Time goes on. We've got the action plans. Everybody's happy with that. And you start to see them talk about an implementation plan and how do you continue to mature against this directive. And this is different than previously because you had different types of platforms and educational materials that would tell you how to build something out, but there wasn't anybody that was really checking. You got checked if you had an incident, and then somebody could point out all the ways that you did something incorrect. But the TSA is taking the time to make sure that these implementation plans come in. And now you're starting to see 2023 where you have to have an incident response plan. You have to test your objectives every 3 years. So that means you have to test 2 out of 5 annually, and you have to submit those to the TSA. You have to turn in your homework. Again, this is different, but we can see that maturity happening. It looks like we got a question in the chat. If you'll just give me 1 second here. So this person is asking, can you provide a little bit more context about regulation for cybersecurity and critical infrastructure and how it's changed? So where it's going. This brings us again to talking about how TSA is requiring you to test annually. You're starting to see these things get implemented or brought in, but more than that, you're starting to see things like CISA and JCDC are providing some services to help you get a baseline. I mean, right here, we're talking about a cyber security incident response plan. That is absolutely something I believe that CISA and JCDC can help with. They offer some pen testing at low to no charge for folks who need it, as well as a wealth of material. So what does that mean about this type of directive is that it wasn't just throw the directive to the other side of the fence and make sure that all the owner operators didn't have a way of implementing it or getting educated about it. So again, this is very different than the last 10, 15 years. So the challenges to implementing cybersecurity controls in midstream. All right, we've already talked about legacy systems and outdated technology, but there is a different form of complexity to these networks. They're not so cut and dry with the way we do it in IT, where we're talking about we're going to add, maybe a new switch and 50 drops for PCs, and we have this very simply architected way to do it. Everything falls in line. It's got standards, so on and so forth. And then you go out into the OT environment, and people just need to make stuff work. Sometimes that does not always incentivize these engineers to take the time and put in the necessary tools and the right tools for an enterprise environment. Sometimes that means they just have to go and buy whatever they can off the shelf. Sometimes it's Best Buy to get the job done and keep the money press running. Remote sites can be either disconnected or have low bandwidth, could be miles away from the the base of operations, whatever that is, your plant. And vendors really they rule in the OT environment. Some of these tools, they're the only game in town. So they have made something, it got adopted, and it is pretty much the same thing for the last 20 years. They're still selling it without a lot of changes, but they need the ability to get into these networks. And just like with any door you have to have open, right? We can't just go bolt our front door shut or weld it shut. We still need people to come in and come out. It is very similar with the business networks and the OT networks that rely on these vendors. So we have to have a secure and safe way to get them access into our sites. Again, these operators, I&E technicians, the folks who are out at the plants, they didn't come from a cybersecurity background. Usually, we are starting to see that shift. Back at one of my first OT facilities, we didn't have a name for them. We just called them unicorns. Basically, people who could understand the I&E side of the house, understand what was going on the plant, and still have IT and cybersecurity knowledge. We are starting to, like I said, see that shift where folks are getting that education. But for right now, there's a lack of it. We have an aging workforce out there who, again, they learn to work with these systems in a very mechanical fashion, and they see cybersecurity as the no squad, the people who tell them no. So that is another big shift that we have to change in the way that we're approaching this, not to mention all the regulation and things that are coming out. But we have to empower these folks to have the knowledge and the ability to not only solve these problems, but spread our cybersecurity platform, whatever that is, or your program, all the way down to the OT environment. Your cybersecurity does not stop at the IT to OT firewall. This is an interesting slide. It's kind of an eye chart. I'll tell you what's going on. So on my right side of the slide, it's talking about the goals per NIST cybersecurity framework function that CISA is recommending, and the goals that were set. Everybody's saying protect. 63.2% are saying protection, protection, protection. And this is strange because the whole time that I was on the other side of the fence and a practitioner, everybody was talking about detect, and identify. So we know that the goal is protection, but what are people actually spending their money on, and what have they done in the last 18 months? Well, that top one in the top left is increased visibility into control system cyber assets and configurations. That sounds more like detection and identification. Implement anomaly and intrusion detection tools on the control system network. We all know that it's scary and terrifying to talk about anything that is, a detection system inside of the OT network. But we're seeing people apply funds to that versus what the goals tend to be, and that 63% saying protect versus what folks are doing. And we didn't have much of a choice, 10 years ago. Most of the information we were getting was if you don't know what's on your network, you can't secure it. Now, I believe that's not true anymore. I believe you should still know what's on your network, but we need to be thinking about prevention and protection first. It is the first piece of the life cycle. All of your detection identification should be a backup partner to that, should be the supporting that function of protect. And what do I mean by that? So if you have a identification and detection tool, or if you have an asset and inventory tool running on your OT network, what are the ways that you are taking and learning from those tools and devices and feeding that into your protection? Whether that means you see gaps in the type of traffic that is coming through your firewall, so you're going and tightening your firewall rules up, which you should be auditing and making sure those are as clean as possible. But are you taking and seeing what the most common types of traffic and incidents are on your network? Are you building that into your policy and procedure? Have you identified the ways that you can respond to those top threats? Again, I think 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, we were overwhelmed with all of the information coming at us as soon as we started listening what was going on the OT network, but as well as the ability to prioritize. A lot of folks on the OT side think everything is critical, and it probably is, right? But if everything is important, nothing can be important. So we have to take the time to make sure that we've identified what we can see and make sure that we protect and prevent the access nefariously or accidental to those types of devices. All right, the practical approaches to meeting these TSA requirements. Again, we're not saying anything different here. You got to have that asset management, but here we're talking about identity management. Identity is a powerful force multiplier when you're talking about any type of security, and it's very native to the way that humans think about security. We like to identify things before we can discuss what happens with the interaction of those types of friends, family members, or strangers. So a quick analogy: if you are in a busy, crowded place, think like a foreign airport, and somebody sprints at you. If you have not identified that person, your security posture is going to change. You are going to think about what those person's motives are and what to do to get around it. But let's say you identify that person as they're running at you, and it is your cousin whom you flew out there to meet. Now that you've identified them, you're going to wrap your security policy around it. That means that you may high five, maybe you're closer, you're going to give a hug, but that's the power of that identity. And it should be at the center of what we're doing. Things like multi-factor authentication come from that. And being able to serve up the network in a granular way and use identity for that as well. Again, our tools in the past were very much about the network security function. Make sure you have your firewalls in between the network segments. Basically, what that left you with is what we call a GUI center. So you have your hard shell, which is the perimeter, but anything inside is in this GUI center. It's free to move around. They can talk to things. And this is where you get those horribly flat networks that are difficult to control. Rather, it's nefarious. So if you think about like malware on an OT network and how flat it is, it's just gonna go like wildfire, or even just the accidental programming of a wrong PLC. So taking that role-based access, and if that user engineer only needs to access 10 PLCs, serve them up that menu and let them only program those 10 PLCs. More than not, you're going to get more issues on somebody fat fingering an IP address and either programming the wrong PLC or hitting a device in a way that it wasn't designed to be hit from the network side. Let's say they decide to start pinging or using any network tools to identify the device because they accidentally fat fingered it. You could bring down another device. So being able to serve up a segmented access based off of identity, extremely important. The vulnerability mitigation, if you can't respond in your OT environment, or if you are handicapped because you can't understand what happened to create the nefarious incident or the negative incident, this is bad, right? We need to be able to find the vulnerabilities, respond to those types of vulnerabilities, and making sure that we understand who should be accessing what. This is a lot of times a journey. You can start by just listening, by seeing what's going on in your OT network, whether it's a span or a tap port, or using tools like what we have to see what is traversing east-west on that flat network. Again, now you're talking about identity and asset management. You're being able to fold that back into your first part of the life cycle, create policies on what should and should not be allowed, and that's the journey that you take. Being able to respond and recover. You should be protecting things as much as we can inside of that OT network. Rather, it's encrypting the traffic in between two very important devices so we can keep the data secure as it's moving, or we're just talking about simply how do you respond from an incident. Having these solid logs that you can achieve at this level using, again, tools like ours, you can really see what led up to that incident. And sometimes you can even be served up a screen recording. We have screen recording functionality, and I'll show you that here in a little bit, where you can see somebody either program the PLC, maybe they were third shift and they made a mistake, or they are nefarious in attempting to nefariously program that PLC. So all of that will lead to a great incident response, being able to have all of the proof to prosecute, or even if it's not at that level, being able to talk to your vendor in a non-adversarial way and say, guys, this is what we saw. This is what the event could have been. Can we please talk about the terms and conditions that we agreed upon when you're going to enter our network? That's way better than having to take the route of somebody accidentally releasing malware or something like that on that OT network and having the relationship after an incident response. Just going to check for questions too. Oh, there's one. What have been the biggest struggles that I've seen from organizations trying to change or improve their cybersecurity posture to keep up with regulations? A lot of it is just, again, that prioritization. We talk to a lot of folks. I've talked to a lot of folks out there, whether it's at trade shows, conferences, or just in my previous experience. And there's a lot of noise, a lot of people telling you how to secure it, what to do. A lot of them are not being proactive, at least the tools or the widgets that we're getting. They're very reactive. And that's that identity and detect and response portion of it of a few years ago. Maybe they've made investments in a lot of that tool, and they didn't plan for the ongoing care and feeding of a true full-blown detection and response tool in their OT network. You have to continuously feed that, get more data, move that over into your life cycle, like we were talking about, to be that preventive and proactive space. The other parts are not knowing where to start, not knowing how to get help. Again, think about the JCDC and CISA and the folks over there. There's going to be this webinar. There's information on our website that really does say, here's how you can mitigate or have put the compensating controls that the TSA is requiring. So this is a case study from Kinder Morgan. They're a fully licensed customer, meaning that they've given us permission to talk on their about them and their interactions with Xage. They had all of the same challenges that I'm sure a lot of you have. They needed to improve the way that folks were accessing their devices. They wanted to move towards a zero trust, that preventative approach. They reached out to us. Our services team, our product, all in concert, was able to implement a approach across their network where they were able to meet the TSA directives, and we improved their security hygiene while reducing risks to the business due to cyber threats. And what does that mean? Because again, back when I was on the other side of the fence, I was the OT engineer, and I considered the business a threat to the OT side. What malware am I going to see today that tries to come over to the OT side? What accidental access? And we also have to realize that the OT network is a very dirty, unkept network. It is the wild, wild west. So it is just as much a risk to the business network as the business network is to the OT network. With Xage, we're able to really help them get to that zero trust type of posture while adding things like MFA and single sign-on in their OT network, where people weren't having to carry around the infamous spreadsheets with the usernames and passwords and host names on it that they've been carrying around for years. Now they have a menu that's based off of their role that also prevents those types of east-west access that typically exists in a flat network. Same thing here, large oil and gas producer. This one is down in South America and Brazil. But what was happening is there was lots of tools, lots of things that were cobbled together where they were trying to achieve this zero trust. They wanted to get a handle on the access management. They needed it to be identity centric. So we were able to come in and provide all of that for them in a way that actually reduced their that opportunity cost and the way that they were trying to manage access management. So we got some efficiency gains there. Not to mention, we were able to improve the way those engineers, I&E technicians, whatever you want to call them, are interacting with the devices, because now they have that simple menu. They click, it's single sign-on. They're not having to remember a bunch of passwords and things like that. So this is going to conclude the presentation piece, but I am going to provide a demo, and I'll show you how the Xage platform is performing either the new TSA controls or just good cyber hygiene controls in general. So give me 1 second and I will bring up my other screen. Okay. So this is the Xage platform and the way that what I'll say humans interact with it. It is browser based. So in this tab, I have our Xage core, which is going to basically have the tools that a power admin would use, a security professional, maybe somebody who's providing access to a contractor at 3 a.m. This is where the sausage is made, so to speak. And on this menu, this is where folks are logging in and using the tool. So the first thing to do is I'll just log in with a user here, and give me 1 second to pull up their credentials. And while that's actually happening, I should probably look to see if there's any other questions. Stand by. Yeah, this is a good one. Basically this user is, or this person is asking, what is the need and why are people increasing or needing the increased protection as opposed to detection and response? I know we talked about that a little bit ago, but it was the prevalent way that we were told to secure the networks on the OT side for many years, right? We got to build a thorough asset inventory. We have to build out all these detection and response rules. But now we're wondering why we put the security system on the house without bolting the doors on or putting the doors on the front. And that's really what people are going back to. They've invested this money. They need that first step of the life cycle to be more proactive. So we're moving to a more proactive state. And it really is going to be that future state. I think it always was intended, which is why it was the first milestone in the secure life cycle, is that we should always be focusing on how we can prevent something, as well as the other legs to the stool or the table, right? We need to make sure that we are detecting and responding as well, but we have to feed that back into our prevention tools. I'm going to log in with what we would typically call, or looks like an internal engineer, I&E technician, whatever you would like to call it. The reason I say that is because this menu is presented in the way for somebody who has a daily job to do. They come in, they're programming PLCs, they're accessing different things on the network. But what I like is once they log in, they are presented with the menu and the access status. If this person was, let's say, an engineer at site 1 and it needed to get to a product on site 2, we could make it so they could request this access, that there's no implicit access. Now, some have argued, well, isn't it implicit access if this person logs in and is presented a menu? And I still say no, because we were able to control other variables about this person before they were ever given the ability to even access Xage. And what do I mean by that? This person applied for a job. This person went through HR. This person did a background check. This person is working every day with their boss and coworkers. We can see that type of odd behavior. We have other ways to continuously checking on this person. We don't think about it. We don't think about it as a compensating control often, but we don't have that for somebody like an outside contractor or a vendor coming in. So this user is able to access these different devices on their network, all in this presentable menu. They are able to invite folks to these different types of situations. So let's say if they are RDPing or using the remote desktop protocol to access an engineering workstation down in the OT environment, or even as something like programming a switch using SSH. These different access methods are presented to them. They are bound to them, meaning they can't change them. Somebody has said that this person needs to access engineering workstation 1, and it's via RDP. And the neat thing is that behind the scenes, what Xage is doing is interacting with these devices on the human's behalf. And so here we see things like negotiating credentials and activating account. What that means is when this user logged out last, Xage disabled their user account and rotated their password. You'll also notice that screen recording is on. So as this person is working, programming PLCs, doing whatever they need to do, this is being recorded. This is a toggleable feature, meaning you can select what devices and people need to be recorded. You can see how many people are in the session. So if you wanted to invite somebody who also had policy to work with you on this shadow, maybe they're a contractor. Hey, I need you to come in and tell me where I goofed up on this PLC program, whatever it is. You would copy and give them this, and they would log into Xage and provide this token. And as long as they had policy, they could come and assist you here, still being recorded, still showing all of the attendees, so on and so forth. The other big thing that people forget about, at least in my opinion, in the OT networks is how do we get files from the IT side to the OT side in a manner that doesn't violate our security policies? So things like taking a flash drive and walking it into the process and plugging it into a process computer. It's bad. That's a main way that people are going to get impacted by these types of nefarious events. They throw poisoned USB drives. They drop them in different places, hoping somebody will plug them in. Problem is, if you plug it into a DCS computer, those are traditionally flat networks. A lot of times vendors will tell you can't use antivirus on a lot of these assets and machines. So something that was simple on the IT side becomes very complex and powerful on the OT side because of the nature of that network. All that to say, how do you get it in securely? Well, what you do is you provide these folks a way based off of their roles to upload a file. So in this instance, you're just seeing some generic files in my demo environment. Here they uploaded the mod scan. It's an exe. Now we can even say this user cannot upload executables. We have a lot of different ways that we can apply this policy to a user to make sure that they're only performing things that are in the company's risk appetite. Now here you see the bad TXT. All this is an ICAR file, but you get the point that when you upload a malicious file, so the other important note is that things like the traditional attack vector of like the older versions of SMB or whatever they're going to come out with next to things like WannaCry, things that can spread fast and beacon out and find other devices that are infectable. These things need to be caught before they ever make it in there. But the attack vector of being able to do that is limited because the human is interacting with Xage in a browser. So even if they had WannaCry on their machine, they would have to upload it into the Xage platform if they were trying to move it to the OT side of the house. Well, let's say it is a bad file. The signature comes across because we pass those files over to the customer's AV scanner. And based off the results, we take different actions. If they're passed the AV scanner and found to be malicious, it dies right there. It never makes it onto the customer's network. It's in RAM. It never gets to go down to that OT computer. So it's blocked. It comes back as malware detected. The neat thing about this is, and I'll kind of just run through it very briefly, is you're now having a proactive conversation with somebody who just uploaded a malicious file. This is not like the incident response that I was talking about earlier, where now you have to basically find all of that malware. Let's just use WannaCry for the example. It's spreading. So you're down there playing whack-a-mole with WannaCry, performing a full-blown incident response, trying to figure out where all this stuff came from. And on top of that, then you're going to have to go back and look at your terms and conditions with the vendor or whomever provided the file and see if there's any legal ramifications, such as suing them for evading your terms and conditions and basically providing the malware to your network. Well, here you see that it's blocked. No malicious activity has happened. You're able to call this user. Our user's name is Kai. I could call Kai and say, "Hey, Kai, I saw that there was a malicious file. I got it. I got an alert from our SIM, and I want to talk to you about where it came from." He says which vendor he got it from, what they're intending to do with it, and now I can bring in my CISO or my leadership and have a much less adversarial conversation again, all due to that prevention. So some of the notes here is that we have provided the operations folks with not only a way to get files into the process, but we have appeased the security folks with giving a full ledger, if you will, or audit log of all of the things that this user did, where they came from, what time it happened. So we're really solving both use cases, and this is rare. Security needs to enable operations, but it's usually not the forethought or the first thought. It's usually secondary, and then that's where we get this whole bolt-on type of conversation where security is coming in and trying to figure out ways to secure something that usually is not as welcomed or received by the OT folks. That makes sense because this is their day-to-day job. This is what they do. But one of the other important things to note, when that user logged in, they didn't have to input a second password. Xage did it all for them. All they had to do was hit launch. This works for other things, right? We've got Telnet in here. This is one of our newer features, and I love it. So I always think of the classical operator sitting in the control room, usually looking 4 to 8 screens. So same thing. We have the, this one is going to be using an RDP protocol. This is called merged view because I don't have 4 monitors off of my current laptop or box. So I'm just going to do it in a condensed view. The same thing, negotiating credentials, activating that account. So we're using the rotated credentials. We're taking the account from a disabled state and bringing it back up. But the neat thing is now I'm pulling through 4 monitors from this Windows 2019 server. So again, think of that control room view. You're able to supply that look and feel that the control room operators are used to in not only a browser, but in a remote session. This could be one of your lead operators over in the UK, or it could be somebody in the site 200 miles away. But we've had customers and other people talk about how had they just had a secure way to get somebody in, they would have, 1, avoided the travel, and 2, they would have been able to fix the problem remotely and quickly. So again, triaging and stopping the bleeding, so to speak, of that money printer. But it's really neat to have all 4 screens. Again, if you can just imagine all of the different schematics and the control room things that are usually up, showing the pressure and where things are going. Again, being able to pull this through to somebody who's at their house or their home office is pretty amazing. All with the recording and being able to see the invitees, so on and so forth. Well, what happens when you need to create a new user or you need to figure out what a user's done? This is all great for the operations side of the house, but what about a security practitioner or power user? Now, I'm going to log in with Azure Active Directory. We do support that. Give me 1 second here. I need to get my multi-factor code here. And this is all internal to Xage. So although we can integrate with other types of MFA, we can also do it completely internally to us. Again, having the separation between those two is useful sometimes, and as well as just if you don't have the ability to push those types of other IT-based tools down into your OT side of the house. But this is what your security practitioner or your power user would see. We do have the ability to make it so folks can only see their site. But right now I'm a super admin, so you're going to see a little bit more. Let's talk about that auditing, those audit logs that I was referring to earlier. You can see here how I'm logging in. You can see when rules are deleted to our Xage enforcement point, which is a really important thing to bring up because it is one of our hardware appliances that allows us to control that east-west access. So it's sitting on the line and it is marrying together the policy and the identity and the network traffic, so you get that real identity-based zero trust network segmentation. But again, we weren't able to see a lot of this before Xage. You had to rely on your firewalls. Your firewalls were usually you're not going to separate everything using the firewall because you're going to have to route all of that, and it's just not how these traditional networks were built. Usually the OT network is the OT network and it's fairly flat. So having these devices down there and being able to see all this activity, all of this going to your SIM and being able to produce rich alerts, this is going to make your incident response easy. But let's go past incident response. Let's talk about those session recordings again. These session recordings don't just have to be for nefarious purposes. I think we discussed that earlier. Let's say this is your awesome technician, engineer, whomever, but he doesn't know how to teach others. That's a real thing. Some people can go and fix these tools and they're very great, but if you ask them to explain it to another human, there's no way they could do it. Now, in their natural habitat, we can record them. They're going in, they fixed the problem. We remembered that it was December 5th, so we went back, we grabbed the screen recording of him, we downloaded it, we added some verbiage, and now we're training his or her peers on how to solve this problem. So we're, again, enabling operations using a security tool. For being able to see the different traffic interactions, these are the things that, again, we were not able to see previously. This should look familiar. It looks very firewall-esque. That's because it was designed to, but we add the identity on there. So look how this all condenses up and looks very nice when you're seeing that this source group to this destination group, we're talking about the policies that were applied. These are hyperlinked to those policies, and we can expand out that traffic. We can see what it is. Not to mention the action, right? Whether it was denied or whether it was allowed. Creating users. A lot of times in my past, I would engage in conversations about Active Directory. Should you have two separate Active Directories? Can you have two separate Active Directories? Of the Active Directory in the OT side of the house, how are you going to manage it? How are the domain controllers going to be produced? Can you get the devices into Active Directory? A lot of these things coming from the vendors were not, couldn't be part of a domain or weren't part of a domain, or you find them later. So one of the things that I think we got wrong is that we started focusing on a separate Active Directory instead of just a separate directory. So Xage does function as a directory. Inside of here are users and groups, very similar to something like an Active Directory. We apply policies to these users and groups, but they don't have to exist inside of your Active Directory. Active Directory gets messy in a hurry, lots of nested groups, and you can accidentally provision somebody. The last person who I want to accidentally over-provision is a remote user who's a contractor or consultant who I really don't even want on my network anyway. I don't want them to accidentally get over-provisioned or even have an Active Directory account. So this gives you the ability to have the directory in your OT network. You can produce this list if you wanted to. You could download into a CSV, whatever you wanted to do. But you have the ability to see all these different users and how they're interacting with things, the policies that they're part of, and then the same with the devices. They get to go into into our directory as well. Basically, it's very similar. You're just going in here and putting the pertinent data. Then access methods. This is how you're going to how Xage is going to work with this device. You probably saw this over here. This is that ABB router. So, and there's their access method of web UI. And what this means is that we're going to pull through an HTTPS session into Xage in a secure format where they're going to have to provide multi-factor authentication just to get to this web UI. So something that we weren't able to do previously, again, securing things like even an HTTP session and a legacy protocol that is inherently insecure, we are now able to bring through Xage and secure it because its access is granted through the Xage platform. So Xage will interact with it on the human's behalf. I think that about covers it as far as the demo. I am going to check for questions one more time before I sign off here and I hand it back to Keith. So give me 1 second. Yeah, so what kinds of threats are being faced by organizations that we're working with beyond just the increasing cyber regulations? If the cyber regulation is the only thing that you're worried about and you want to check those boxes, you're probably not going to get everything you need to secure your environment. Remember, this regulation is coming from past events and they have to serve it up in a way that it fits the majority of the folks out there. That should be your starting point. What does the government require to get a baseline? And then what specific to my organization do I need to secure to make sure that I have shored up my network and the types of access that are according to my risk appetite. And what do I mean by that? Past the regulation and things that you have to do for compliance, it's all based off of your risk appetite past that. So if you have the ability to suffer a whole plant going down and you don't consider that a catastrophic loss, then build your program around what you consider catastrophic and those types of events, because this is what's going to tell you the places that you don't have to provide that additional, what we're just going to call insurance, where basically you're adding tools just to say you did it, but you really don't understand the security gains that you got from it. This is where the organizations are struggling. They've got the compliance, they've got the regulation, and now they're again trying to go back to that prioritization on what do I do first. And that's where I'm saying it goes back to your risk appetite. How much can you take on? Where are your crown jewels? And do you have those protected? So all that to say, most of the folks out there are probably just like you watching this and having similar struggles. So if you think about what you're struggling with, it's probably very similar to what they're struggling with. Great question. All right, Keith, I'm going to hand it over to you. I really appreciate being here, appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you learned something from this.
Well, I certainly did, Michael. I learned a whole bunch. Operational technology is fascinating and an often overlooked area of IT, but it's of absolutely central importance to our world. So seeing how Xage is securing operations is so timely, and I love the in-depth demo. Those are always great. Thanks for your time today, Michael, and for answering those questions. Just been so much fun to have you on. And with that, folks, I am going to move on to the Amazon gift card prize drawing. Oh, but before I do, I wanted to remind you one more time, there's a couple of PDFs from Xage that you should download. Go over to the handout section and do that in the minute or so that we have left. Get those and download them and read up about what they're doing. So Amazon gift card prize drawing, back to that. As I mentioned at the top, you do have to be in attendance for the entire event to be eligible. And the winner of the $250 gift card for this event is Sean Taylor from Virginia. Congratulations to you, Sean. We'll be in touch to get you your card ASAP. And with that, everyone, on behalf of the ActualTech Media team, we're out of here. I want to thank Xage Security for making this event possible. I want to thank all of you attendees for being here, for your great questions as well. Always good to see everyone. And that concludes today's event. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, folks.